Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young. I'm just going to walk you through a quick presentation on what the United States is likely going to go through for the next 4 years and probably early on in the first 60-90 days of office, since we'll likely see a transitional team come into play in basically January, where the hand of power is turned over from Obama to President-elect Trump. And it's critical to understand this because for countries like Canada, who generate about 75% of their trade with the U.S., we need to understand the next role of government in the U.S. Now, this is only one quick presentation. As I said, you're more apt to go out and watch YouTube videos or even look at some of the feedback from academia or business in terms of what they think Trump's policies will be. A little bit about myself. I'm about 25 years experience on CPA, CGA by trade, but I look at solutions, but I also look at the impact of government policies. So if we look at the U.S. economy, just like Canada, it's growing at a very slow pace. Yes, we're seeing some upticks in certain areas of the economy, like retail sales, but in a lot of cases we're seeing really a lot of regional disparity, and you're seeing that the way the elections was basically on electoral college reform. So you've seen areas like New York and California that went Democrat, but a lot of the average Americans voted for a change because they've seen stagnation with their wages, they've seen low economic conditions, and to be frankly, the current path that they're on, they do not see that it's viable with another Democratic government. So what they wanted to do is try something new. And Donald Trump's emphasis, and this is what's critical with business, is American first. When you do a policy American first, you're going to do policies that benefit your people. You're not going to necessarily look at the globalization impact. You're going to do something normally to impact economic conditions to make Americans' lives better. Now, what you're going to look at too as well in terms of what is required, and there's multiple buckets of things, from environmental conditions to reform government spending to public safety, economic policies, and tax reform. Early on, what you will suspect once Trump names his various basically different departments from Treasury to basically public safety, and get those people handed over the portfolios, they'll start looking at what they can be done. Now, Trump owns all the houses, so getting any sort of economic reforms passed or anything changed on immigration policy likely will move quicker through the House because he'll have the votes to get these agenda through. But it will take time. You can't come in on day one and impose all major changes. You have to gradually phase in because you're going to have your T-bills and all your debt issues to be basically measured in the open market in terms of your policy. So he will likely look at reforms, but they likely may be phased in over time. And that's from the tax code that looks at bank reforms, trade deals. You can't just open them up. You have to have a process in play that you have that negotiation. But you're going to see a change in how he operates, and that's something to bear in mind as a business person. Now, the election issues were very succinct. The income inequality, jobs were the big critical one, along with immigration. When you see stagnation of wages since 2000, where the U.S. wages haven't even grown, then you're seeing considerable pressure there and concerns. If you look at GDP growth now, I would hardly say 2.2% growth is strong growth. That means it's challenges. Now, the government has a certain role in terms of economic policies, but it can't drive everything. So it has to be very careful that it has a balanced approach in terms of its policies. Now, one of the big things the U.S. is doing is part of the initial, and this is what Bush did, is pulling some of this cash in by reducing some of the tax rates in terms of refunding this cash in. So that is something to bear in mind because a lot of U.S.-based corporations will maybe want to take some of that cash, put it into R&D, maybe in capital investments. So that's something to bear in mind. However, that being said, with a sluggish economy, there are decisions how companies are operating right now, and over the last few months we've seen less investment in capital equipment because they weren't sure about where the economy was heading. So that's to bear in mind as well. This is just giving you a quick idea where wages are and basically the struggle in terms of wage growth, and it's something to bear in mind because that basically is an area that people were voting on, and you've seen some improvement this year because the economy's picked up a bit in the U.S., but it's still been sluggish. Employment. Now, over the last few years there's been more pressure on doing nearshoring. We've seen that into play, but in general, with Obama adding in Obamacare, which was a great idea but was probably likely not implemented the best way, it's added a lot of cost to people. And that was another reason some of the people got voted out, because they saw some of their Obamacare costs going up 300-400%. Well, that's pressure on household budgets when you got to spend more on healthcare costs. So that being said, Trump said he will look at it. Well, there's probably going to be some sort of new program coming into play to make that it's sustainable. And right now, Obamacare is not sustainable. In summary, we've seen retail sales are still very sluggish. Manufacturing is still sluggish. Exports are sluggish because if you look at the key countries where we're dealing with, like China, some of the European countries, we've got sluggish growth. Now, everybody will tell you it's an easy fix to do that. No, because you've got a demographic shift around the world where baby boomers are aging. The problem is we don't create the conditions right now to employ the next generation of students. Plus, also, those students are not necessarily prepared for the jobs of the future, whether that's cybersecurity, whether that's working in analytics, whether that's working in expert farming, whether that's working in advanced manufacturing. Those are jobs that basically require a certain skill set. Now, the universities are doing a good job, but we need to have a balance here. We don't need more liberal arts graduates. We probably don't need certain people because the economy only produces so many positions in those areas. So there needs to be more alignment with education as well as with business and government in terms of how they're going to get the skills up to be competitive. Because if you're not competitive, that impacts your productivity, and that's something to bear in mind as you watch the trends. This is just giving you a quick idea of retail sales, basically how they're up, how they've been doing, about 3%. It's something that you can't look at 1 month, you need to look at average trends. E-commerce is another area that basically is growing. The US was pretty good at adopting this, but you're going to see more movement in this, and this is basically mobility side in terms of what's going on in terms of how digital media is used. Housing prices are started to rebound. Now, this is no disrespect to Obama. He did a wonderful job, but he inherited a hornet's nest of 20 years of policies in terms of deregulating the mortgage market. And that impacted the overall housing prices. We're starting to see rebound in that area, but it's still slow. And you're still seeing the access to debt in terms of mortgaging for the younger generation or millennials is becoming more restrictive. Trade is the big area, but in terms of Trump, he's looking at fair trade agreement, but that makes no difference to Canada as well. We should be looking at that as well. But the key point is Trump is very succinct. He's not bringing in carbon taxations. He's not going to bring in more tax and more regulations. In Canada's case, we elected a new government there, and their goal is to increase taxation for carbon, CPP, which now puts our business in an uncompetitive environment against their peers in the U.S. You add in hydro rates as well, and you're adding for a perfect storm of where business investment may leave this country because it's just not cost effective here. And as much as these politicians think they're doing the right thing, they're not supporting the conditions that allow foreign direct investment to come to countries like Canada. Now you're going to compete against a government in the U.S. that's going to be pro-business. That's setting a recipe for some issues in Canada. Now, this presentation was a brief idea to kind of give you an idea where the country of the U.S. is heading. It's something to bear in mind as you have discussions and read further on. You're going to hear a lot of rhetoric like provinces are blaming Trump coming in will hurt the Ontario economy. No, the fundamentals of any economy is driven by both provincial, municipal, and federal policies. If you've implemented bad policies that make your business environment uncompetitive, then you have to deal with that. You need to fix those things. You can blame people all you want, but if you make decisions to go a particular way on policy, then you need to be held accountable for that. And the only way you're being held accountable in every country is through elections. And this is where people need to kind of call their politicians out and say, the model that's working in Ontario, Alberta, Quebec isn't working, then what do we need to fix it? If these people are not the leaders that we need to drive that process, then we should be making a decision to get rid of them. And that's really what it's coming back down to too. This rhetoric about blaming people doesn't solve anything. We need solutions. And what we need in terms of that perspective is we need to move forward with policies that are balanced. Not left, not right, balanced. And that's where we're failing. And we've been failing for probably a good decade or so where we, in a lot of levels of government, we haven't brought in policies that have been fair. Now, as I said, this presentation gives you a good idea of what's in play now. There is a big role of having more protectionism policies in play, and it's something to bear in mind as you watch the trends in the economic conditions develop over the next 1, 3, 5, and 6 years out. Thank you.